Donald Trump just finishing his visit with Japan. Meanwhile, Mark Carney got snubbed and Japan wouldn't even meet with him. And Canada got some of the worst possible news coming out of the US-Japan trade talks. I've not seen anybody else mention this as of now. This is the flashing lights. This is the warning that Canada needs to be proactive and change, or this economic downfall, especially from all these trade war changes, will be absolutely devastating. And the best thing we can come up with is more politicians are doubling down on ads being run in the United States with the help of cover of more mainstream media hit pieces inside of Canada to try and take on the US. And this is all going to be tied in with the US government shutdown, how they could use that to reposition in a positive way for the US. Meanwhile, Canada will be left to flounder. There is a lot to talk about in today's video, so let's get into it.
And across the ocean, President Trump continuing his Asia tour, meeting with Japan's new prime minister. The two leaders pledging a golden age of alliance and securing a critical minerals deal. The commander-in-chief also taking time to address U.S. troops on board the USS George Washington.
And unlike past administrations, we will not be politically correct. You don't mind that, do you? When it comes to defending the United States, we're no longer politically correct. We're going to defend our country any way we have to, and that's usually not the politically correct way. From now on, if we're in a war, we're going to win the war. We're going to win it like nobody ever before. You know, we'd go in with...
Side note, because he's coming into this hype meeting here, did you guys see the entrance that he had where they brought him down on the platform and there was two jets beside him? Everybody was cheering. It was wild. It was awesome. Shout out to Trump.
Blast the hell out of countries. Shouldn't have gone in. They used to say, to the victor belong the spoils. Well, we'd be the victor that would leave because we had people that didn't know what the hell they were doing. As commander-in-chief, I never forget that our ultimate strength does not come from equipment. It comes from the men and women of the rank and file. That's true. It comes from you people, incredible people, good-looking people.
And Jackie Heinrich live in Tokyo. Hi, Jackie.
Good morning to you guys. President Trump has a new friend in Japan's first female prime minister, Sanae Takaishi, who was just elected, came into office about a week ago. She's conservative, a protege of President Trump's friend, the former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. And
Shinzo Abe, who Trump was very, very good friends with. I don't know if we've seen a more positive reception to Trump going to it for a state visit around trade negotiations. The amount of gifts they gave the U.S., the body language, every single thing. Japan and the U.S. have had a strong relationship for a very long time. But this level of connection, it's pretty clear to see Japan has the buy-in in the U.S.
She not only wooed President Trump with a lot of personal gestures, but she also followed through on a deal that was struck by her predecessor this past summer to invest $550 billion in the U.S.
There's a big detail coming out of that $550 billion.
Equivalent to a tenth of Japan's economy. That investment, despite its debt, in exchange for a lower tariff rate of 15%. Both sides, though, appeared very pleased when the first $490 billion was announced this morning.
We had a phenomenal day here in Japan with a momentous trade deal. We made a big, beautiful trade deal for both countries. In fact, to the best of my knowledge, I think Japan also had their best stock market day ever. So your new prime minister is doing very well.
We'll get into, again, some of these details when this is finished, because the positioning that Japan did is great for them, it seems like, overall, and most likely keeping the Americans happy. It seems like they played the long game, but it's paying off.
Japan and the U.S. also agreed to ramp up mining and production of rare earth minerals, all the more critical in light of China's near monopoly on that industry and its threat to throttle the entire world's tech transactions with aggressive export controls. And Japan will increase defense spending, heeding President Trump's call, and deepening defense cooperation with the U.S. as China looms over this region.
The cherished alliance between the United States and Japan is one of the most remarkable relationships in the entire world. Really, there's never been anything like it. Born out of the ashes of a terrible war, our bond has grown over 8 decades into the beautiful friendship that we have. It's a foundation of peace and security in the Pacific.
They didn't show the clips there, but when Trump said how happy he was that she was the first female prime minister of Japan, and he was congratulating her, and she was just jumping up and down, and she was so excited. Like, again, the body language seems like it's there. When we get into the positioning, man.
Rallying the troops aboard the USS George Washington, the president said in another tacit message to Xi Jinping, the first batch of missiles for Japan's F-35s will arrive next week ahead of schedule. Trump is expected to meet Xi on his next stop in South Korea after the two sides agreed to halt China's rare earth export controls for a year, averting Trump's 100% additional terror threat that was set for next week.
Obviously, that's huge news with the China stuff, the rare earth minerals. And don't get me wrong, Japan and China are not necessarily the best friends. But we even have posts here from the Japanese Prime Minister. My sincere appreciation to President Trump for his friendship. Japan, together with our ally, the U.S., is determined to do everything we can to contribute to peace and prosperity at the heart of the world. Both security-wise and their economy, Japan has deep ties with the United States. And that's why this detail, which has almost no mainstream news coverage in Canada, this should have been front page news. Hey, mainstream media, do your job. This is what Canadians should be prepared for. Because Trump says, go out and buy a Toyota as automaker pledges $10 billion in U.S. investments. This is one specific automaker that is responsible for 8,000 direct jobs in Ontario, which has an auto sector that is already under fire. Like I've been warning in other videos, we are just manufacturing foreign IP inside of Canada. Once it makes more sense for them to manufacture in the States, we are at risk of losing all of that manufacturing when we don't have a competitive advantage. And it seems like that's about to happen. Canada could be losing Toyota. In Tuesday's address to U.S. troops in Japan, President Donald Trump expressed gratitude for Japan's substantial investments in the United States and announced a significant development in the automotive industry. Trump, during his speech, shared that Toyota Motors Corp is planning to establish auto plants across the U.S. with an investment exceeding $10 billion. So go out and buy a Toyota, Trump said while addressing U.S. troops aboard the USS George Washington stationed in Japan. I don't know, guys. Are you seeing that all over Canadian mainstream media that Canada is about to lose basically the linchpin to auto manufacturing across all of Canada? This factory, responsible for 8,000 jobs, responsible for tens of thousands in additional indirect jobs. So it looks like, as of right now, obviously it has not been announced yet, that Toyota could be moving, if not all, most of their manufacturing down to the United States. And that is a huge win for the US and an absolute massive blow that Canada, in my personal opinion, on top of all these job losses that we're losing in autos in Ontario, yes, as much as people hate to admit it, Ontario is an economic engine for Canada. If Ontario gets decimated by losing the entire auto industry with nothing to fall back on, I don't know how long it would take Canada to recover, possibly decades, because there's no backup plans because our government continues to shut down all of these projects. Across all of Mark Carney's meetings at ASEAN, the best thing he could get is a free trade deal with a developing nation that is a mostly export economy and gets all of its imports from China. So he got Canada the ability to compete in manufacturing against China in a developing nation. Great work. Oh, Canada will get access to more textiles. That's what we needed. More cheap, fast fashion. That's exactly what Canada has been sorely lacking. It's the ability to buy cheap t-shirts. So all we can do is get the ability to compete with China in Indonesia when we can't even compete with China domestically. And why I think this Japan deal was a long-term plan is we already saw that Honda was shutting down a bunch of its planned expansion inside of Canada and moving its existing production, some of it anyways, down to the United States. So now you see these Toyota announcements, and then you have to piece together that Nippon Steel, aka Japan Steel, was just approved to buy US steel this last summer. And yes, Nippon Steel does provide products to the US auto industry. So now there will be double incentive to support Nippon Steel as it supplies its products to more Japanese companies expanding their manufacturing inside of the United States. It will be creating American jobs, creating American demand where they can buy even more vehicles as these jobs are created. Because a lot of people know if you're in the area, working at Toyota was a pretty desired job for quite a while because it paid so well. So now you're seeing this integration of the supply chain for all these Japanese autos growing in the US, and that is a massive blow to Canada. Everybody was scared to mention Toyota for a very long time because it was almost like Voldemort, like, just don't mention Toyota. We cannot afford to lose Toyota, and it looks like it finally happened. One of the major pieces of pushback from all the announcement of the new manufacturing that's coming back to the US is America doesn't even have the labor to support that. One, there's a lot of people on the sideline in the US who are looking for great production and manufacturing jobs. There's also potentially going to be a massive labor shift from unproductive government roles back into manufacturing roles, which is way more productive. Let's check this out. This is Peter St. Onge again with one of his great updates. We'll play a bit of his clip here.
The government shutdown could theoretically last until 2027, according to Zero Hedge. Dare we dream? As the federal shutdown enters day 28, we are just 1 week shy of the record set back in 2018 when Trump wanted a border wall and Democrats wanted new voters. Republicans ended up surrendering on that one with not one penny for the wall, but this time, amazingly, Republicans have held the line. This is probably because polls are showing the shutdown is not actually hurting Republicans. In fact, their odds in the midterm elections, which is the most important thing in Washington right now, have actually gone up since the shutdown began, now hitting 40%.
So American viewers, comment down below your thoughts on the shutdown and how this lasts. He gets into a bit of the financials here, but we'll get into my theory on the labor rotation.
Yet here we are, near even after 4 weeks of shutdown. Now the polling suggests mainstream media's lost their mojo, while Trump has been very careful to keep funding everything popular, so the military, ICE, WIC for pregnant women, while starving all the left-wing garbage, the foreign aid, money holes for New York subways and wind farms, food stamps for illegals. So there's little pressure for
food stamps for illegals being another key point that we'll be talking about.
That takes us to Zero Hedge, who asks, how long can it keep going? Now, the key is most past shutdowns were paired with a debt ceiling, which makes markets panic about treasury payments, which are the lifeblood of our Ponzi financial system. But the next debt ceiling doesn't hit until mid-2027. That removes the external pressure to cut a deal. So if the world's not ending, if markets aren't even noticing the shutdown, if Republicans are rising in the polls while Democrats are afraid of their Antifa base, nobody needs a deal. In theory, this means they can literally keep going until 2027. So for fun, what if they do? For starters, 2027 is far past these 61 days needed to permanently fire federal workers.
That's one of the big key takeaways here with the shutdown is we could see mass layoffs from federal workers. In a lot of those roles, they're wildly unproductive because it's government taxpayer-funded roles. If these people are laid off permanently and their jobs are gone, they will have no choice but to rotate into the private sector. The private sector continues to get massive announcements of more companies onshoring their manufacturing back into the United States. If these people are to rotate into the private sector as they should, not only would it start to shrink the government spending, it would now create more actual real production. So the net swing of losing government employees into the private sector is the best possible case scenario. It'd be amazing for US prosperity. Not only that, it would increase the GDP per capita in the US, which is already high, which increases the overall standard of living for the average everyday American. It's all because government spending is inflationary. For the most part, a lot of the money is borrowed on top of the taxpayer dollar, so it's unproductive money getting entered into the system to buy less products being created. But funny enough, I just had this conversation with a friend last night where I said this exact same thing that Matt Walsh is saying. It has to do with the budget and SNAP. By the way, if you guys have any connections with Matt Walsh, put me in touch with him because he's been talking about Canada a surprising amount lately. So if you want some background info on the Canada, I'd love to help him out there. But here's what he said. He said the number one thing that artificially inflates the price of groceries is the food stamp program. The federal government is subsidizing groceries for 40 million people, also happening in Canada at different levels, of course, but happening, which obviously drives up the cost. That's why the increase in the cost of groceries tracks exactly with the increase in the number of people on food stamps. It's tough to draw that exact correlation, but I get it. So as a functional contributing working American, you're getting scammed twice. Once when the government steals from your paycheck and gives it to EBT recipients, and again when you go to the grocery store, you're paying twice that so the morbidly obese people can buy Doritos on your dime. Infuriating. So Matt Walsh, we are on a similar wavelength there, and that's why I call out all of the government food spending programs and stuff that we have here in Canada, because the principles are very similar. But speaking of calling out the Canadian government, the best the government of Canada could do is run this hit piece here that says BC will go ahead with its own anti-tariff ad despite Trump blowing up over Ontario's ads. So they're doubling down. Another province wants to really stick it to Trump. This is how we're going to stand up and listen to how dumb his argument is.
BC Premier David Eby says the province will go ahead with its own anti-tariff ads aimed at the American public.
First of all, let me say that I support unambiguously Premier Ford's advertisements in the United States. It is absolutely essential that we talk to Americans about the implications of tariffs, about the fact that trade policy in the United States right now is governed not by logic, not by economics, not by relationship, but by something else entirely.
Well, it seems to be working. We're about to lose our entire auto sector because people like you just don't accept realities.
And by one individual in the White House. And the best example that I can give of that is the fact that Russia has better access to the US market right now for softwood than Canada does. So we will continue to work.
So he's using the example that Russia has better softwood access to the US than Canada does. Russia, the country with all of the sanctions. Russia, the country that does essentially zero softwood lumber trade with the United States. They import almost zero. The number is so statistically small, I couldn't even find it recorded anywhere. So basically, all the information says zero lumber comes from Russia. So you're cherry picking Russia as a country. Well, they're being treated better than us. Yeah, with their global sanctions, they're being treated better than Canada and the US are treating each other. Come on, smarten up and be real. It's the same argument as being like, well, there's no auto tariffs on Sudan when it comes to importing them. Canada pays a higher auto tariffs than Sudan does. Why is that fair? Well, maybe because Sudan isn't a threat when it comes to their auto manufacturing sector. So we're not going to cherry pick nonsense arguments and pretend like this justifies you running ads, which is making the Americans mad and hurting Canada and the US trade negotiations. But we know the mainstream media is going to continue to run cover for these politicians and get the people riled up because they put this story out, and I laughed at it because in this same story, they contradict themselves in the same story. It's so short, and it just shows how it's straight up based around anti-American sentiment.
The U.S. will soon be requiring all visitors, including Canadians, when entering and exiting the country to have their photographs taken at all ports of entry. The U.S. recently releasing new rules that change regulations that may require all aliens to be photographed when entering or exiting the United States. For passengers we spoke with, the change won't affect their travel plans.
Even just from an editorial standpoint, I love that they called them aliens instead of visitors.
If it's just a photograph, I think that's okay.
It doesn't affect my travel at all. It doesn't change my thoughts on traveling at all.
I think that it's okay that if you're letting people in your country, you should know what they look like for sure.
While the change in
So the average everyday Canadian seems to not be against it. Why is the media?
regulation is set to begin on December 26th, it could take longer, with potentially 3 to 5 years needed for it to be implemented at all commercial airports and seaports. The U.S. is citing national security as well as catching those overstaying their visas as a reason for the change.
What I worry about is this kind of a slippery slope. Okay, well, we took your photograph there, and now maybe if you're going through the land crossing, we have license plate readers, and in fact they do, right on the Montana side of the border, that will track your every movement. So if you start doing what we call data jigsawing, where you put together one piece of information with another, you can really invade somebody's privacy.
Data jigsawing, the cutting edge technique. And don't get me wrong, I'm not arguing on behalf of Big Brother and data collection here. Obviously not. The reason I think it's funny is they continue to run all of these, oh, we're worried about your personal data and your freedom and the infringements and all of these stories about crossing into the US and how it's such a risk to Canadians. The mainstream media ran coverage for all of the rights violations during COVID, but because it's the US, it's such a big deal now. But make sure you sign up for the app that $60 million got stolen.
Changes coming at a time when more Canadians are already opting not to travel to the U.S. Polling done for the Travel Health Insurance Association of Canada shows that just 26% of Canadians plan on heading to the U.S. during the winter.
Here's where we get to the contradiction in the video.
37% drop prior to this year, according to the organization.
However, we're also seeing there's a need to go to warmer climates. So we're seeing individuals more open to southern parts of Europe.
Oh, southern parts of Europe.
Mexico is a large destination, as well as other parts of the Caribbean.
But if Canadians aren't happy about this latest change, there is something that they can do.
You can turn around and not enter the United States.
Want to know why I mentioned Europe there? Because Europe has the same program being rolled out right now. Every country in Europe is starting to photograph everybody who comes in and out of their country. They're using Europe as an alternative travel destination. If you're unhappy with these new changes and you want to protect yourself, just go to Europe where they're doing the exact same thing, of course, but it's mainstream media hypocrisy on full display. Not one pundit has said, hey, EB, why are you using Russia as the example? That doesn't make any sense, because they never push back at all when it's anti-American sentiment and when it's liberal politicians and somebody's going to say he's NDP. He's just liberal. They're all liberal crazies, okay? And it's exactly why the mainstream media is not going to put forward stories saying, uh-oh, we might be losing all of Toyota because of Canada's decisions, and maybe we need to take some accountability inside of Canada and find major projects to work on. Because another thing about the deals that Mark Carney seems to be crushing and landing that all of the mainstream media is excited about, they only want Canada's natural resources, which we have no infrastructure to set up to get to them because we shut down and slow roll all of the projects. So instead of just building a relationship, getting a deal done with the US, we are going to sign deals that we can't even fulfill because we continue to shut down the infrastructure around because of all the environmental reasons. And now Canada will have no one to supply to and no products to even supply as foreign companies continue to remove all of their manufacturing from Canada. So this is the flashing lights. We have to be proactive. We need to find ways to make sure Canada is okay. We can't wait until Toyota makes the announcement. They're going to. When they've made the announcement, it's too late, guys. Wake up. We have to start taking action now. But if you made it this far in the video, you absolutely rock. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We're trying to get these videos out in front of more people. We are trying to grow the channel. If you want to support the channel, you can do it through the link down below. You can also do it directly through YouTube. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.